Don't you love that sound? Good afternoon. How are you all today?
Doing good.
Good.
Excellent. Excellent. Thank you for agreeing to chat with me today. I'm very excited for this conversation. Since there are two of you, I will leave it to you to decide who will go first, but whoever does decide to go first, will you please tell us your name?
Sure. My name is Matt Haldeman.
Oh, very nice to meet you, Matt. And Matt, will you tell us a little bit about yourself? Anything you feel comfortable sharing?
Sure. The first thing I did out of college, the first job I ever had was as a classroom teacher. It was through Teach for America in inner city DC. It was the most rewarding and the hardest thing that I've ever done. The story that I always tell is I had 32 third graders, and 2 were illiterate and 1 was reading at a high school level. And I remember thinking through the challenges of reaching and challenging each one of these students every day. And I quickly got excited about the ways in which technology could be an important part of the classroom. I think it's kind of amazing if you think about pick any profession, right? Pick medicine, and think about how different a doctor's life is today compared to 2 decades ago or 3 decades ago. All the ways in which technology is used to enhance and change that work, or an accountant, or really any role. And then you think about a classroom teacher who kind of stands up in front of a classroom of students, sort of like they did 100 years ago or 200 years ago. I think there's all sorts of exciting ways that technology can be used to improve learning. Like if the Netflix algorithm gets to know who you are and what sort of movies you like, then our learning technology should get to know learners on an individual stage and really help and support them. And because I'm a classroom teacher, I'm always going to think of technology as a tool that supports and helps classroom teachers. But that's something that I've always been passionate about. I actually went back to the business school after my time in the classroom, and ever since then, everything I've done has been thinking through the ways that technology can impact the way in which we educate and support young people. And that was really the founding principle of the company that Dan and I founded, called Alarium.
Excellent. I look forward to hearing more about the company. I do have a question for you. So the curriculum for teachers has not changed much over the years. The process for becoming a teacher hasn't changed much, yet technology has evolved such that, we have digital classrooms, we have hybrid learning, we have all of these different ways of learning. Why do you think education has been so slow to adopt technology in its learning module?
Yeah, it's a good question. I don't know exactly why. When I was actually taught in DC and in a small village in Africa, and then in inner city New York in the Bronx. In all 3 cases, we had technology, and what it was 2 or 3 2 or 3 computers in the back of the classroom that got a little bit of use, but not a ton. It certainly wasn't transformational in the way I think it could be or should be. I mean, I think there's all sorts of understandable concerns when it comes to barriers. I have 3 young boys, and we think about screen time all the time. But I think the biggest challenge with education is everyone can remember their 2nd grade teacher. Everyone can remember their 3rd grade teacher. And no,
I don't know either one of them, but I'm a dinosaur, so that might be part of the problem. I remember my college professors.
There you go. I think a lot of people think that the ways in which they were taught are the sort of right ways to do it. And so I think in education, we're often resistant to change because we say, well, it worked for me at 8 and it worked for me at 9, so it should work for my students. In other industries, we kind of accept, for example, in medicine, that there are advancements, that things should look different as time progresses. But for some reason in education, we're a little bit more resistant to change.
Thank you so much for that. So Dan, welcome.
Thank you.
May you please tell us your name, please?
My name is Dan Mackey.
Very nice to meet you, Dan. And Dan, will you tell us a little bit about yourself? Anything you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah, so I grew up in a home where my parents didn't have a college education. They were very entrepreneurial. My mom ran a daycare out of the house. My dad had a construction business, remodeling business. And I loved being around those 2 environments a lot. We had the kids my mom had in the house were of all different backgrounds, which I loved, and the folks that my dad worked with were the same. So it was nice to feel like there was just a lot of diversity and just a lot of it was a cool environment. And just seeing the way that everyone was treated in the home, but also the way that employees and coworkers and things were treated at my dad's office, and I would go in there quite a bit. It was just really encouraging, and it made me want to maybe view that working environment as a place where people could learn, and they could learn on the job, and they could get ahead. And I love that. So as I went to school and as I started working in my careers and working with various companies at smaller stages, I found myself really attracted to the workforce development aspect. How could we train folks? How could we leverage education on the job in a way that wasn't just, okay, just watch what I'm doing and then that's how you learn it, but actually put some intention behind it in addition to that. And worked with a content marketing company where we had tens of thousands of freelancers on the platform. And one of the most rewarding things of that experience was knowing that we were enabling and training these folks to put food on the table for their families and to be able to upskill themselves. And when Matt and I met at McGraw-Hill Education, that was a lot of that work too. It was, we're working with these organizations and we're working on ways that their staff and their employees can learn new things, can upskill regardless of where their starting point was. And I think that was, for me, part of what attracted me to the company that Matt and I started. So being able to support companies and organizations in how they can train their staff, and even better, how they can start that training as a strategy to get a whole new influx of employees that don't have to already have all the qualifications that they're seeking, that oftentimes disqualified a number of other folks that had awesome potential, but didn't have every single checkbox checked. So those are the things that are exciting me currently. And I think that drives the company, but that drives passions too.
Excellent. So what do you see as the biggest challenge with the current workforce, pre and post pandemic? What are the biggest challenges that you see?
That's a big one. Well, I think the biggest one pre-pandemic is the surprising lack of preparation that companies had with going remote. I mean, there were some companies that I think have done a great job at that early on, but there was a lot of resistance to remote prior to the pandemic, and therefore there wasn't a lot of good preparation. From a learning standpoint, a lot of companies, I would say almost most companies, really had a lot of their strategy still focused on live or in-person events, and that became much more challenging when you had the pandemic and you had a lot of the remote workforce that we have now. So I think that there's been a transformation, which is good. There's been a swing to, okay, now we've got to not only work well remote, but we have to train well remote and we have to onboard well remote. And now I think the new challenge, at least in that era, is how do we keep that going? How do we get these companies that say, okay, I think I saw an article earlier this morning, which said that a particular company wants to bring folks back to the office to increase productivity. And I thought it was a fascinating stance. To me, I have to say that I think folks have done a really good job over the pandemic with productivity. And most articles I've read have shown that productivity has even gone up in many cases. And giving workers that flexibility, their satisfaction with their jobs have gone up. So nothing wrong to coming back in the office here and there, but if your sole reason is to boost productivity, there might be something wrong there. So I think that's the next challenge that I see is, okay, now that we've had a taste of this remote work, remote training, how do we keep the good stuff going and yeah, bring in the in-person to augment that, but maintain that good momentum.
Excellent. That's a very good answer. I think that really one of the interesting things about work pre-pandemic was, the idea of working remotely to a lot of companies, even big companies, was just a foreign concept. Like, why would we do that? Companies like Google and Apple, they had more flexible policies. There's a company here in North Carolina called SAS. They have, play areas and areas where employees can, let their hair down, if you will. But, the idea of having a 40-hour workforce was almost a foreign concept to companies thinking about it. And then the pandemic hit and we showed what we could do remotely. But there's still some people who believe that we need to go back now that we're on the other side of the pandemic, which I don't agree with. I don't think we're on the other side of it, but wherever we are, that we need to go back into the office. And what I think, and specifically in the areas where you and Matt work, I mean, you're going to have a lot of people that are going to transition out of those jobs that force them into Monday to Friday, 8 to 5, sitting in the job, because we've proven that we can work remotely. We've proven we can be productive. And we still have managed to somehow hold on to some aspects of the social things that happen when you're at work, and to a smaller degree, our own mental health. Now, I think your point, Matt, about screen time is very, very important. But if you think about what an average day was in the office, and since you are all on your own company, it might not be a true statement for you, but for me, an average day. So I'd get into work 6, 7 o'clock in the morning, and I'd be on the screen for a couple, 3 hours doing email, setting up projects or whatever. And then I'd walk away, I'd go talk to someone, or I'd go to a meeting or something. So there was a breakup in the day that I wasn't looking at the screen. Is that not possible even in the remote environment, that you do have time when you were away from the screen?
That's a good point.
Yeah,
it's a great point.
Well,
I think it's an ongoing challenge, and we're right. I think it's not uncommon for us to, actually just 5 minutes before we jumped on, Dan called me and he said, "Yeah, I'm going to do a call, not a Zoom." And I talked to him while I walked in my backyard. I think those moments you always have to look for. But I completely agree with you around the 9 to 5. So, for example, 3 weeks ago, we were hiring a woman to join our team part-time. She's a new mother, and she does the Zoom. This is her interview with her 3-month-old daughter on her lap. And we talked to her. This is a very smart, very talented woman who can't go into the office and can commit to 20 hours a week, but can't tell us when those 20 hours are going to be. They're going to be during naps. They could be one in the afternoon or 1 in the morning. But in 3 weeks, she's become one of the most valuable people on our team, and a huge part of our success. And it really doesn't matter to us when she does the work. And we like to think we have a little bit of an edge and can find super talented people because we're willing to be flexible in those ways.
Absolutely, very progressive. So now tell us a little bit about your company. So when did you start it? What is your goal or your mission or your primary business? And what is it that's in the environment that you need for the next level of your business, if you can?
Dan, you want me to go high level, and then I'll let you talk about the tactics? So one thing I've learned a lot working with Dan. For a decade and a half, my career, if you'd asked me what I was trying to do, I was focused on closing the opportunity gap. I wanted to make it so that your opportunities in life weren't dictated by the zip code where you were born. And I, for the longest time, thought there was one and only one way to do that, which was to provide high quality instruction from birth to 18 or birth to 22, and make sure that everyone across the country and across the world had great opportunities. And at McGraw, and working with Dan, I saw a new, different way to close the achievement gap. And the way I think about it is, I've stayed in touch with a number of my students, and many of them didn't go to four-year colleges for reasons that I think a lot of people would know and recognize. But they're very smart, very talented people. And what they're looking for are employers who say, "Hey, I'm not looking at your resume, I'm not looking at your degree. What I'm looking for is, I've listed out, here are the 72 competencies you need to do this job well. I've just assessed you. You're good on these. I need to teach you these. And once you do that, you're going to be a phenomenal employee." So everything we do in one way or another is about closing the achievement or the opportunity gap in that way.
Thank you.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I just said thank you.
Oh.
Yeah, to elaborate a little bit, I think that when we look at the point of which the education should take place, I love this idea of companies themselves owning that. I love this idea of companies saying, we're going to onboard you, but that doesn't just mean that we're going to teach you where to find a copier. We're actually going to teach you the subject matter. We're going to teach you about our industry. We're going to teach you about the role. And it doesn't matter if you've had that role before, if you're in that role. we're gonna take care of that. And I think that's awesome. And what we found as we've focused there is that same training is applicable to the market. That same training is applicable to their clients. That all of a sudden you have, if you've got the right mindset, then you're covering more bases. I joke because education and marketing have a significant overlap. And so we often find ourselves in conversations that are more marketing in nature. And I've always joked because there's folks that look and they say, well, in order to get to do a better job at beating the Google algorithm, here are all the tricks and manipulations. And for those that remember, once upon a time, it was things like, I always joke because at one point in time when I was in high school, it was suggested to me that for somebody's website, I should at the very bottom, the background was white of the site, and at the very bottom, I should put in white font all the keywords that we could think of, because that will be the best way for folks to find you. And it was tricky. And I always say that my philosophy in that arena is if you design engaging content and you are putting good media in the mix and your goal is to create the quality content, chances are you're going to meet the spirit of the rankings and you're going to do really well. And I think that same way, I think if a company is intending to say, genuinely, we want to pass our expertise on to these new potential employees, our market, our clients, I think so much good comes out of that it covers over those folks that say, well, no, we've got to use tactics in order to increase certain metrics. And when people start hearing the details, you're like, oh man, behind the scenes, that doesn't look awesome. But when you start realizing that these companies are using education as a strategy, and they're doing better by those that they're teaching, those they're passing that on to, that's super exciting.
Excellent. So let me start by asking you, Matt, from what you described, sounds very, very interesting and very exciting. But in a lot of ways, you are reshaping the arc of how we understand employment and careers, because it's not the traditional way, so you go to school, you get your 4-year degree, hopefully somebody gives you some first level experience so you get your feet wet, and here you are, which is that's how I started out. I started out school and here I am. I often say this, and I get in trouble for saying this, but I can't think of a single thing I learned, and I have 4 college degrees in college that I apply to anything I do in work other than the discipline of going and knowing something has to get done in a certain amount of time and knowing that you can't delay the work. That said, my education also was very fundamental to me because it helped me understand how people work together. And so you all remember the dreaded group work, right? We all hated group work because you got a person in your group that was always a slacker. But it helped you learn a lot of things. So there are some very, very positive benefits. But I think what you said, Dan, and what you said also, Matt, is like, so taking someone not based on their experiences or their educations and framing them in such a way that they become committed or they buy into what you're doing is really a new and innovative way to bring people on board. Because what's your, and we could take anyone, but what's your commitment to this organization or to this company that hired you? The paycheck you get once or twice a month, the benefits you get once or twice a month, maybe the relationships you've established with a few people there. But literally, if company B comes along and offers you more money and more benefits, what's going to keep you there? But a company that develops you as a part of themselves, as a part of their organization internally, bringing you into the fold. This is how we do our business. This is what you need to know to help us do our business. And we're going to provide you that training or that education. Is pretty insightful and exciting to think about.
And I think that education plus the flexibility, and this includes the remote work, full-time remote workers, I think that's going to really allow an additional level of loyalty, maybe, as long as it's both ways. I think it's going to improve that what was formerly I would think of as tension. I think it's going to improve that. And then you've got scenarios like somebody has been doing a certain career half their life, and they just don't feel fulfilled, and so they want to switch. But they are looked at a certain way by companies that say, well, I don't know, you've been doing that career for so long. This is different. I don't know if I want to take a chance on you. So you get that population too that maybe did leverage their college degrees, but they just have a different mindset and they want to do something different. And so I think there's a lot of different paths folks can take. And that's the beauty of what, when I look at education, and as Matt talks about what technology can do, I think there's a real great opportunity here to just take anybody that has the potential and bring them in and get them trained and grow them. I had a mentor once that told me that whenever he brings somebody into his team from an employment standpoint, he knows that he's either going to have to at some point promote them or let them go, or put them in a position where they're so happy that that they'll stay forever because they love it. So he's like, those are the three outcomes. He doesn't want the outcome where they leave for more money. He wants to get them so that they're upskilled. And I've loved that advice to just say, okay, great. Well, those are three outcomes. And if that means that we train you and you go somewhere else, companies should embrace that. And I think they should be focusing on, okay, well then who are we teaching next? I think that's the way I think my philosophy on that one is.
Excellent. So where is your company based, and how do you recruit new business? What's your process for that?
Company's located in Massachusetts.
And is it fully online? Is it a fully digital company, or you have brick and mortar and you have to interact with people physically in order to do your work?
It is fully online. And we've talked a little bit about this. The one fundamental thing that we think is unique today that wasn't even true a few years ago. So it's common to hear people talk about how the training they received, how the education they received didn't align with the actual job that they had to do. But for the first time, essentially in history, if you wanted to learn what we do and you wanted to know what it took to do our jobs well, guess what? We've already talked about this. For good and bad reasons, we are in front of a computer every second of the day doing our job. So if you wanted to see what it takes to sell new business and manage a team and all of the dozens of other things we do, just press record through on a given day or on several days, and you can really see what that looks like. So one of the things that we're doing with our organizations is helping them realize that everything that's happening over Zoom, everything that's happening in webinar is a learning opportunity, capturing it, cataloging, and saying, this is your training. It's not a series of documents. It's not just a degree that you need. If you actually watch people doing the job that you're going to do, it will be the best way to train you for that job. The challenge from a sales perspective is, we're either reaching out to people cold who've never heard of us or people within our networks, is we think there's sort of two cells. One, we have to sort of convince them on this new way of seeing the world. And then number two, we have to convince them that we're the right people to execute. And we feel like in order to sell anyone, we have to sort of check off both those boxes.
So how do you reach more marginalized communities? So older people, Black people, brown people who may not necessarily have the education or experience or even context to even know what you and your company does. How do you market to those groups?
It's a great question. We have one answer, but we're exploring a bunch of others. I was talking to someone who said, "Hey, Matt, what you're doing is really interesting, but the people that are doing the work don't belong to the communities that they're supporting. Wouldn't it be really exciting if you could do the same thing that you're talking about, where individuals within the community are actually supporting that community?" So we had a team brainstorm session. We asked ourselves, how could we solve this problem? And we came up with a new idea that we're kicking off. We're hoping that this won't be the only one, but that current idea is this idea of training students in a high school to support the teachers, the parents, and the students with IT support. We want to create an apprenticeship program for individuals within a high school or within a district, help them be the ones, so that if I'm a student and I have a question, who do I go to? I go to another student. And there's a whole bunch of benefits. If I'm working that help desk, guess what? I really feel like I'm contributing to the success of that school or that district. If I'm the student with the question, the person I'm going to is someone who looks like me, who speaks the same language that I do. We're excited to explore more opportunities where we're helping train people within a certain community to support that same community.
Yeah.
And I'll add to
Go ahead, Dan.
I was going to add to that. One of the other things that we're doing is for a few of our clients, we're doing some sales enablement training. And what we're doing is we're creating simulations of conversations that they would have. And when doing that, we're able to take a more animated approach, even though it's realistic animation. But in that sense, we're able to present a diverse cast of artificial actors, if you will, that allows them to have that experience. So that company that says, well, traditionally 90% of the people we're selling to are like old white men, but we're seeing more and more diversity in our clientele, but our training is still being done by the seasoned veterans in the industry. So how can we change that? Well, we can start introducing some digital assets that are a lot more diverse, bringing in voice talent and bringing other folks that from those communities and from those backgrounds to be those actors, if you will, and then presenting that to the companies as a way for their employees to experience some of those differences. So that's another way that we're aiming to get more in there.
Excellent. I think one of the interesting things about how we are as, and I'll say just in the United States, we're kind of siloed by things that are really artificial. They are not organic, so, white or black, short or tall, young or old, whatever the thing is that we allow to push us in these places has limited our ability to exploit all the talent that we have. If you look at us very early on, the very early onset of what the United States was, without regard to race, every other thing they took advantage of. So we had immigrants from all over the world. We had people with new kind of ideas and things, and that really grew our country. There's a show that comes on the History Channel, The Titans That Built America. And you look at and diversity, I don't think it's the right word, but the differences of their ethnicity, their experiences, whether they're poor, so we really did do a very good job early on. But once we established our foundation and we knew who we were as a country, we said, oh, well, all we need is white men now. That's all we need. We don't need anyone else. So, it was hard to get women in. So one of the reasons in education, for example, specifically public and elementary education, the pay is so low because women did that work primarily early on. And so because she had a husband and she was just supplementing their income, you didn't need to pay her more. Well, we're in the 21st century and that story is not true anymore. So it's just amazing to think about how we break the mold of this and to be more inclusive. So I sit on the board here locally of the public school system. And one of the things I often tell them, we make an assumption that people learn exactly the same, which is not a fact. And we make an assumption that what we're teaching, people are getting. And you can tell what's happening among Black and brown boys by the dropout rates. And COVID really highlighted that even more, that when children get to a certain age, they're not required to go to school. After they've lost that interest somewhere early middle school or somewhere, they're out there. And sometimes they're out there, they become a part of a prison system, a gang, or whatever it is, they experience poverty and other difficulties. The way that companies, and I would say even companies like yours are, I think, going into the school systems is a perfect example of work that you guys do to actually change that dynamic. Because my son is academically gifted. He's 22-year-old. He's very, very smart man. He wants to work in IT and all of those things. But by 7th grade, he had lost all interest in school, completely lost all interest. And it was only because he was so smart that he managed to succeed and get through and go to college. But, you're assuming that everybody sitting in that seat has the same preparation, has the same understanding, and has the same goals. And that's not necessarily the case. And so we must find a way to reach those that have been, I guess, normalized to the point that they don't care. They go for the social aspect. They go to lunch. They go to hang out with their friends, but they don't go for the learning. So how do you address that? How do you correct that? I know I ask hard questions. It's my favorite thing to do is ask hard questions.
We thought there'd be like a couple softballs, but we're
no. Because I really do think you guys are onto something. I think you are really onto something. The question just is, how is it more pervasive for everybody and not just a select group? And that's really what I'm trying to understand. And I want people to know, because people who listen to this and will come to you or come to your company and say, hey, I want to participate or I want to do this, they have some sense of where your thinking is and what you're doing about some of these very complicated problems that we have in our society.
Well, one thought that I have, by the way, I agree with everything you say. There's a great quote. I'm going to butcher it a little bit, but it's something like, if a doctor had 40 patients in her office, some who wanted to be there and some who didn't, and everyone had a different ailment, and she had to treat all of them at the same time, she'd have some idea of what a classroom teacher deals with on a daily basis.
Amen.
And it's absolutely true. One of the things that I think about, so we're in the process of designing an onboarding training for a financial organization that hires people from all different experiences. And one of the things that I think about, and I think that is true whether you're 10 or 20 or 30, is why can't learning look a little bit more like work? Because I'll tell you, I've learned a lot on the job, but I don't go and sit and have someone talk to me all day. Some things I go and figure out on my own. Sometimes I need Dan, so I go and we talk about things together. Sometimes we bring our whole organization together and we brainstorm. In a given day, I'm learning in about 4, 5, or 6 different modalities. I'm figuring out what schedule works for me, and I'm putting it all together. And it seems to me that the ways we learn, no matter how old you are, could look a little bit more like that.
And when you think about that, think about early education. So I guess after the religious education, early education, but if you think about that experiential learning, how did a young man learn how to run his father's farm, or learn how to manage the books? He didn't learn that by going off to school. He learned that by being on the farm, working alongside his father and all those pieces. So absolutely, I think that is the case. I think that, you are tackling very complicated and complex issues, and there are always going to be variables that kind of rock it one way or the other. The most important thing is that what your ultimate goal is seems very, very legitimate and very, very needful in this time where we are. I mean, the number of people that are leaving their jobs. I mean, like, I saw something on one of those sites, I can't remember what it is. There were over 30,000 STEM jobs in the Northeast alone. Northeast? I mean, like, so that's New York, Philadelphia, all of that. 30,000? How can they have that many openings? But people retired, people died, people, whatever they did, but they decided this wasn't the career for them and they left. And the companies that lose these people do not necessarily have the tools to recruit, because we use that search engine, right? So company puts up an application tracking system, they post a job, they want you to apply for it. So they want you to tell them your name, social security, birth, all that stuff, and they want to tell you the experience and all those keywords you have. And then there's a chance you might get an interview, more likely not, but you might get an interview. The process needs to change to be more fluid and to be more consistent with the way people are. Like, how do you learn to sing? How do you learn to play the piano? Do everybody goes to lessons, or do some of them, as you said, with the doctor analogy, you have these different types of things. Where do you get those skills from? And that your company is willing to help companies understand how to meet those needs and to replace staff as they turn out is a really important task. So I thank you very much for that. So what is it that we can do to help you? How can my listening audience help you?
Well, I would say one thing is to the companies that you work with, not saying that we're the only solution at all, but have the discussions internally on how they can transform their education and training programs to account for more folks coming in that don't have the same purple squirrel background that these recruiters are looking for. I think that's one thing. I think another thing is the applicant tracking systems, and those have automated disqualifiers built right in. So you could throw resumes at it all day. It's just going to chuck them out. Right. And part of that could be even just the formatting of your resume. It's just silly. So I think the culture has to change to how can existing employees reach out to other folks that they know? How can they make that part of their conversation about, hey, not only is my company starting to do these kinds of trainings where they're open to having people without every single checkbox checked come in, but how can I be a part of that as I'm talking to my neighbors, as I'm talking to folks? How can I spread that and then get more people in? That's one of the things I think is going to make a big difference.
Absolutely. And I think if people understood how difficult an ATS is, most people would never apply for a job, because it almost always goes nowhere.
And LinkedIn, it's funny, before Matt and I started the job, I made efforts to find another full-time before Matt and I had solidified this. And I got to say, it was like, I would go for an opportunity on LinkedIn that would say 13 applicants. And I would look at my background and I'd say, well, I'm probably overqualified, but let's try it. 13 applicants, great. 6 hours later, it's like 435 applicants. At that point, you're just like, the recruiters are going to be overwhelmed. So these traditional paths aren't going to work. And the companies that just say, well, these are our preferred universities we're going to go to, and then, oh, we can't fill our jobs. I mean, so you can't just do them. Those, you got to be looking in other areas, and you got to be offering the training that can bridge the gap between the folks who don't have every single checkbox checked and what could be if you allow them in and train them right.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I will say, one of the things that I often tell people, when you bring somebody new in, partner them with someone more senior. Give them someone they can follow around or see what they're doing, because at least that gives them a sense of how the work is done and the expectations. Now, that person may not be the best employee or may not be whatever, but at least you have a model. Because when you set somebody in a desk, set them with a phone and a computer, go to work. Okay, now I've got to learn on the job, and I've got 90 days before they terminate me because I haven't mustered what they're expecting me to learn. So it makes perfectly good sense.
I like that. It seems really powerful. Like, imagine if every person doing hiring said, I'm going to reserve one slot. I don't care if you interview 20 people. I'm going to reserve one slot for someone who does not have the specific background or experience that I'm looking for. I'm going to keep an open mind, and I'm just going to ask myself, what would it take for this individual to be successful? If that was all that you did, how powerful a movement that would be.
Amazing, truly amazing. And that's a really good concept. I hope that's what you guys are trying to get companies to understand too, is, people talk about algorithms and automation and artificial intelligence and machine learning. I could tell you, I probably was an algorithm expert when I was about 7, because simply an algorithm is a recipe, a set of instructions to have something come out, And what's really interesting about that is, so I'm a fairly good cook, and one of the things I make a lot of is pound cakes, because people love my pound cakes. So a pound cake is simply a pound of everything. Imagine if you didn't measure the amount of flour or the amount of sugar or whatever it is. You didn't set the oven to the right temperature. The cake does not come out right. And I can't tell you, I've had tons of failures. Tons of them have gone wrong. And just think about that in developing systems, and whether we're hiring or doing something based on an algorithm, which has human components added to it. No matter how much machine learning you wrap into it, still has human components added into it. So I think those are pretty powerful things to think about in the work. And I hope that when you become really, the next Apple or Microsoft, whomever you're going to become, that you don't automate so much of your systems that you take the humanity out of it.
It's funny you mentioned that you've seen failures and you've experienced that. I mean, that's such a good teacher. Right. I know from experience that the folks that encounter a challenge and fail, but keep going and then eventually succeed, learn a lot more than the people that don't have those challenges.
Absolutely. You should see one of my pound cakes that failed. It looks like it's been in a car accident, so you have to throw that away and start again. And it's not, and what's really interesting about it, it's not something that happens immediately, right? So you make the cake, you think you've done everything right, you put it in the oven for an hour and 15 minutes, and it comes out, it tastes, okay, something went wrong here, and you have to start again. So it's having someone to support you to start again. So when someone asks for a pound cake, they don't care how long it takes me to make the pound cake. They just want the pound cake. I'm not going to get fired because my pound cake went left. But imagine that pressure it puts on an employee that, I failed. How do you support me so I don't do this again?
Yep. I think that makes me think of when I had done something entrepreneurial years ago and it didn't work out. And one of the reasons why is because I was solo. And while I think solo entrepreneurs are awesome and they're very capable, I found that there's a lot to be gained by having a partner. And Matt and I were able to work well, really well together, I think, even though we're very different people. And if more entrepreneurs thought a little bit more that way and said, okay, instead of trying to die on the hill and going solo, if they brought in more folks, especially if they're local businesses, or if they have certain markets that they're aiming for, or if they're in certain geographics, like those partners they bring in could really help facilitate this community feel. I think that'd be really cool.
I agree with you 100%, but I would just go a little bit further, bring in somebody Black, bring in somebody old, bring in somebody young, bring in somebody from another country, because, it's like we're always talking about inclusion a lot, but the way I think about the world is different than the way the two of you think about the world. What do we bring in a conversation together? What do we bring together? And I think that's what really organizations need to do, is have more different thoughts and ideas, and this doesn't necessarily mean black or brown or female, but have differences to bring their experience to the project because they bring more. I think what you described in your part-time mother is a beautiful example. Imagine what she's bringing to you. I mean, so she's got a big job, right? She's got a newborn baby. She's got to balance and juggle all of those things, and her experiences are different from yours. Even if you have kids, she's bringing more to that conversation than just, you know, this perspective or this experience. So I think that's a wonderful thing. Wonderful idea. So we have a few minutes. So I want to leave the remaining time to you to say whatever we didn't cover or you want to cover that we didn't say. So please.
I'm just gonna say one thing, this just reminded me, we have a mentor. This was a former client of ours at McGraw-Hill, a chief learning officer at a large company, who's never been afraid to speak her mind, and never had a problem telling her boss who disagreed with him or maybe slightly stronger language than that. And what she would always say is, she would say, "What if I'm just going to agree with you, then what's the point of having me around?" She's like, my whole goal here is to push you and help you understand where I think you're making a mistake. Anyway, she's a great mentor of ours, but just hearing you talk reminded me of her saying that, and she had no problem pushing anyone from her boss all the way up to the CEO.
She must be related to me because I am that person. I think it's in trouble all the time because I'm always speaking my mind. But I do think that's important to have it, even if my thoughts or ideas are not in alignment with the other person's. At least they deserve the value of being considered. What you do with them or not. So if I sit here and tell you, well, you should start your business in Seattle instead of Massachusetts, at least you've had a different point of view. You might say, she's crazy as all get out. Does she not know it's on fire and it rains over there all the time? So, you know, it's just getting some different inputs that help you think through that, you know, what you're doing and how you're thinking. And that's true in all aspects of your life, not just work, but all aspects, you know, to get some different ideas and thoughts. Anything else you all want to share?
Well, it's funny. It might be a little off topic, but how do you raise kids in a way that allows them to be different, or allows them to voice different opinions? Because so many parents now have a parenting style. I think it's been that way for a while, of kind of, you know, seen and not heard, or you've got to do it my way. And balancing that has been a big challenge in my life. I have 4, and balancing wanting my daughter, who's 9, to be able to be a strong, independent person. She definitely is, with you know, raising her to be a good person, polite but not quiet. And it's such a challenge. Yeah, I don't want her to enter the workforce and feel like she needs to be in a timid role at all. I want her to be able to feel free to be herself. But it's always that challenge as a parent, you know, to make sure that we have to be mindful, I guess, of that.
I think that until the workforce realizes that singleness is not the best thing. So you remember Google's facial recognition? All white men developing facial recognition, and what do they put up a gorilla when they see somebody that looks like me. The environment must realize that we are better as a whole than as a one. You know, I think I know a lot. I think I'm smart. I think I'm capable, but I'm not. I don't know everything. I don't know how all these things work. And so I have 2 only children. I have a daughter that's older than my son. If I told you how old either one was, I'd probably have to kill you. But anyway, because they would kill me. But one of the things that I believe is allowing them to share what they think about any given situation. So whether you're watching TV, you know, when my son, when he high school, first went in 9th grade, he got his first debit and credit card. And he got paid the same days I did. Whatever day I got paid, he got paid. So when he ran out of money, we don't have any more money until the next time I get paid. So what are you going to do? And if he had commitments or responsibilities, he had to learn how to navigate those in a way that helped him. And so what he has become much better financially than I am. His credit score is probably 1,000, while mine's probably 800 or 900, because he understands that money thing well. And I never tried to enforce my views about that. So, you know, if he wanted to go out and buy a $300 pair of shoes, I never said a word, buy it. But just remember, you don't have any more money coming in. So, you know, that $300 shoes go, you have to eat them, or, you know, you got to let other people wear them, or something, something. I don't know what the answer is, but something. And I believe that if we give children challenges that allow them to express themselves without being penalized or punished for it. So if you cooked, I don't know, steak and baked potatoes, and you cook the steaks rare, And the kids say, oh, that's nasty. Okay, we won't cook you that kind anymore, but at least, don't say, well, too bad, that's what I cooked, that's what you're gonna have to eat. And that's your my way or the highway kind of thing. I think that's where we stifle children's minds and their creativity. She's still going to struggle into this workforce. And I don't know how old she is, so maybe it'll evolve. It won't be in my lifetime, because I can't tell you when I came to work at the place where I'm working at now, I told my boss I wanted to be a CIO. You know what she said to me? She said, I'm not smart enough. How would she know? How would she know? But that's what she said. I'm like, okay. And then, I said about other things I'm interested in, and it was always something that I could or couldn't. I wasn't capable. And when you feed that in the workplace, it minimizes people and their opportunities. You want to be a CIO? Go apply and see what happens. Go on a couple of interviews, see what happens. See if someone will hire you as a CIO. But you have to give people a chance to do that, as opposed to telling them what they cannot do. And right now, the society we have, where it's more white male dominated, there is, and I don't know this to be true, but this is what I believe, the competition among white men is so thick that everybody else is casualties of that competition. So this company, this guy that, like you just saw the two people go into space, that kind of competition is just, where does it leave room for other people to do the same? Because I'm not going to have $1 gazillion to fly into space, so you have to be in a way more inclusive, in that you're including everybody who wants to and everybody who can, and so that the lady that was 70 some years old, who had trained as an astronaut many years ago, and she got to go into space, she started her own space program. Just a thought.
I think that's a great connection of when you're raising kids and into the workforce. I totally agree with giving them space to express, so that they can be that person. And I think that it's 100%. I think you apply that to the workforce quite well. So those good thoughts. And I'll have to take your style with the credit, the payday being the same. I think that's awesome. And I think the challenge of letting them buy what they're going to buy and letting them face the consequences is awesome. I may steal that as my kids.
All you want to. You've experienced it, right? We all have, right? We've all experienced it. It's happened to all of us, even in our adulthood. We ran out of money before the next pay. Well, you innovate, you make do, you find a way, and so that's the way you learn. And you learn. I think that in your learning modules that you're developing, sometimes, and I think you said it, Dan, you have to fail. You have to know the consequences of what goes wrong. Because if everything you do is right, it's this perfect, you hit the, what are you going to do when you fail? And almost all of us in our careers very early on, and even in the latter stages, have failed and will continue to fail. That's a part of learning. Without failure, there is no success. Because if you don't fail, you don't know how to succeed, and you don't know how to live in success. So I am so grateful that you took the time to talk to me today. I hope you'll come back and keep us posted on to where you're going. And, a little bragging on my part, I am known as a connector. So I have probably 30 or 40,000 people in my network. If there's something I can do to help, please feel free to call or text or email or something. I am looking forward to seeing what you do. And I am very, very proud of what you're doing. And if I can help in any way, please let me know.
Thank you so much, Dr. Newton.
Thank you for having us. We heard a rumor that guests get weekly pound cakes. So we should probably.
Yes, you have to be able to come pick it up, though. So since you're in Massachusetts, you're going to have to wait until you come to North Carolina, or come to Massachusetts, which I don't think either one of those things will happen anytime soon. But if you want a pound cake, just and I'm happy to ship it to you. Because believe me, I ship them to New York all the time. So if you want a pound cake, let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. You all have a great rest of your week.
You too.
Bye.